Hi there, it's Piccia and Neri here. I'm one of the currently 3 website Mavericks, Jan Koch, Lee Jackson and I. So once a month we have webinars where we examine customers' websites, Cloudways customers' websites they submit. You can do that too if you're interested. And we look at, each of us looks at what is our specialty. So I am an expert in UX and UI, so that's what I look at. Then Jan Koch looks at the technical side of it, and Lee Jackson looks at the content marketing and branding sides of it. So I just want to give you a breakdown and tell you what I look at, what my priorities are when I examine a website. Now, it has to be said that the people we do it for, have really great results. They report hugely increased conversions and so on. So it's worth listening to. And so I'm just going to give you the example of the last website that we looked at, which is A Lovely Planet, which is a wonderful website all about traveling the world. And I love it because I love traveling and I love the photos, the beautiful photos, and there's lots of great content in here. So what I look at first, so number one thing that I look at is what is there for me to do as a visitor landing on this site? Is there anything I can do? And for instance, in this case, in the case of A Lovely Planet, there isn't quite. So I can see that they are concentrating on the content that they're creating, but really there should be something for me to do. You need to have clear in your head what it is that you want your visitors to do when they land on your site. It could be that you want them to fill in a form. Well, then in that case, do the best that you can, because to get them to fill that form. The ideal thing is that you should get your visitors to find themselves in a place that is the best for you, but it's also the best for them. That's a sweet spot, and that's the best user experience as well as the best marketing. Because if you're really sure about your product, then surely you know that you're doing a favor to your visitors, to your customers. And if they're the right customer to visit you, then it's also in their interest to be where you want them. So that's what you need to decide. In that case, what we said when we were doing the review for A Lovely Planet, which is run by a lovely couple, and the woman is called Hayley, and they clearly they're based on content, but we said that it's not clear. There's no experience on this page. Once you start going into the content and the destinations, there's loads of great stuff, and look how brilliant the photos are. Now, the best diving in Southeast Asia. I'm interested because I am going to Southeast Asia this year, but there's no experience, as it were, because there is nothing for me to do. So the message from that is that the lesson is to make sure that you know exactly who your target audience is. That's the first one. And then the second one, think of where you want them and get them there in an easy way once they land on your site. Now, Hayley has said to me that she's already implementing some of the changes, which is brilliant. And I think, if I'm not wrong, the typeface is bigger since we first saw it. I can't remember quite exactly, but I think that is a change that has been made already. So clearly this is all about content, the content, which is great. But then the content, you should maybe have something, you could have something here such as, where do you want to go next year? And that's something for your visitor to do. Like, for instance, in my case would be Southeast Asia. Bing, click on Southeast Asia and get taken there. So even with something as simple as a travel website, there are things that you can do to engage the visitor. So number one, what is the visitor supposed to do when they land on the site? That's the number one thing I look at. Then usually I move on also to look at the brand a little bit. Now, the content marketing and the branding in the sort of wider sense, that's Lee Jackson's territory. But what I look at is things like the visual branding, which is, in this case, this logo here, A Lovely Planet. My recommendation in the case of A Lovely Planet is that it's a lovely logo, but it's a little bit too complex. When you make it small, see they've changed that, because here it used to be different. Now it's just a globe, which is absolutely fine. But you see that if you make this logo much smaller, then it disappears. You can't see it because it's way too detailed. And it's not a vector version. So a vector is basically an image that is not made of pixels. I'm not explaining it really well, but it's an image that is easy, that doesn't have contours, that doesn't have any complicated details. You know, a bit like an icon, as it were. If you don't know what a vector is, then you can imagine, you know, the little icons that you have, like this arrow here. That's a really simple representation, because also vectors can be against any color background and they don't have a background, whereas this image has a background. It's probably just a JPEG. So that's what I look at, and my recommendation in this case was to make the logo way simpler. Keep the lovely watercolor illustration, keep it somewhere else, but if you want a logo, then make it way simpler. Then usually what I look at, and it's a hugely important part of web design, is typography. So summing up, we said that the first thing that I look at is what is there for the visitor to do. Where are you sending me? What's your call to action? That's number one. Number two, I look at what the logo is, what the visual branding is like. And then number three, I look at the typography. Now, typography is extremely important because the web is still 95% written content, believe it or not, even with a huge ascent of video. So in this case, it was a bit too small, and now it's bigger. And I think that we'd made a point. I also very much care about white space. So what I mean by white space is not the fact that this header here is, coincidentally, is white. White space is a space that isn't used. It's areas of, also you can call it negative space, but space that you can use to give a little bit of breathing space. And for instance, I would say that here now the header looks all right, but it's way too close to the content. I feel this grid should be lower down. I love the fact that the grid is full width, but the grid I feel should be lower down. And that's also to do about typography, because with your typography, you always to make sure that you have enough spacing as well. And see how just by talking about one specific thing, I kind of, it's not veering off, it's just that everything is connected. So I will point out other things that are helpful to think about. So to look at now, the typography here in the menus is lovely. It's now, it's definitely big enough. I always say, please make it big enough, because even though you know that your audience is a young audience, there might be still be people that have visual problems. And also, you have no idea how early people start having visual problems. And even people who don't wear glasses actually can't see very well. So the best thing is, I mean, they say that 16 pixels is ideal, but I would say 18. And it very much depends on the typeface that you're using. Some typefaces are way too tiny at 16 pixels. So you need to always verify. Ask your mum if you're not sure, ask your mum. So, and I love the fact that it's such a nice, you know, curvy, friendly typeface. I think it goes perfectly with the idea that I made myself with the brand. I'm now going to show you. Let's go into an article, and I'm going to go into the best diving in Southeast Asia, because that's where I want to be next. Yeah. So they haven't had time to change this yet. My comments on this were, I mean, you have lots of white space here, which is brilliant, but here I would not recommend, there's two things I do recommend. I would keep, I know that they're using a version of the typeface that's kind of looks handwritten, and it's all right. I mean, it's not too bad, but I would make the headings way bigger. And then when it goes to the body copy, I don't recommend using this typeface, because as lovely as it is, if you go into detail into it, apart from the fact that it's now a bit small, and you see how there's very little line spacing. Line spacing should be just right. Again, it depends on the typeface, but it starts from 120%, but it depends really. So you need to play with it. There are websites that can help you with that, but there's in this case there's not enough space between the lines. But even worse, the line is way too long. My eye can't follow all the way there. It's way too long. And third point is that while this typeface is lovely when it's big here and it's for headings, so not very long words, I don't recommend it as a body copy typeface because it's too simple. I love its simplicity. I love how it's round. It's a beautiful sans serif. I really, really like it. But if you can see the letters are all very similar to one another. The A, you can barely take it apart from the O because it just has its tiny little, the descent there. It's way too tiny. And so that's a reason why in the long run you don't want to be reading this, because people with dyslexia might have issues, or with other different ways of seeing the world, might have issues in taking the letters apart because they look too similar. So I would recommend that you change the typeface for something that's more readable. And normally serif typefaces are easier to read. So this is a sans serif, which is the simpler one. We know like curly bits, and the serifs have the curly bits. Now, because this also, what happens here is that because they have everything on one big column, on one central column, then here where they have the amazing, brilliant breakdown. I love this menu here with all the. It's called with all the titles here. There's a specific name. I'm old. I can't remember. It comes to me in Italian and not in English. Never mind. So you see that for this reason, there's way too much white space here. This is a little bit too much, and I love the fact that it's here in terms of user experience and information architecture. Having this content breakdown here is brilliant. Well done. It's amazing. So let's say that I want to, because for instance, I may know that I'm going to I've been to the Similan Islands, they're amazing, to the Banda Islands, and I can already jump there, which is fantastic. Well done. But can you see here how the layout needs breaking up a little bit, because the photos are amazing, but they get me, oh my God, don't you want to be there? It's fantastic. So we recommended to work on the layout a little bit. And this came from me just talking about the typography. So I would say that point 4 is looking at the layout in general and how that helps the experience, because the way you do your layout really, really changes the experience. And because you lead the eye, you lead the person that visits your website to read your content, which is what they want to do in here. And there's not much leading being done here, because it's all boom, 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 boom. It's just coming straight down. And Hayley told me that they were already making changes. Oh God, don't you want to be in there? I do. She was telling me that she was already making the changes, and that they had now chosen. We recommended choosing a theme, because this is a WordPress site and they work with themes. We recommended choosing a theme that would have already a layout for the blog posts, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use a layout that works for you, but that then leads the eye, because they're doing so well here with the information architecture. Brilliant job. I'm so happy. But then the information needs to be broken down. So I would say then 5 is layout. Number 5 of what I look at is the layout. So after I've looked at the layout, I then usually take some time going over a few other pages in the website, because again, I want to check what the experience is like, and also I need to get an idea of what it is exactly that you want your website to do. And in this case, I think maybe it's the ads, because they've got ads on the pages which are not moving. I don't like animations, so that's really good. and they're not bothering me for now because they're really on the side, but I don't know what will happen when they change the layout. I'm sure they will do it discreetly. And so I think that this is maybe they want traffic and they use content because of the ads. So in terms of the content, brilliant job. Again, like we said, also I would add, then this is the point where I think about more about the website in general. And so this is where I start giving you advice about how to organize your content a little bit. And in this case, I would say that it's really well organized, but also I would have tags here. Maybe I would have a better way of helping your user navigate and get to what they want. Also, another thing that's really important is the about page. So the about page is really essential, and it should not be the last one. It should be much earlier, because that's how people interact with the website first. So many people go to the about page first. All statistics say that it's the most important page on your website. And I love that the whole story here is just so nice, and I love their Instagram. The photos are amazing. They have a team, so it's a really lovely story. And the Instagram here, they're having a good amount of followers, and it's a really engaged Instagram. So I don't think there's any point having it here. Usually there's no point, but you do need obviously the icons, which reminds me, I can't remember if we said it when we did the actual review, but I would have, if your social following is important to you, then make it much more prominent. Not so much sharing buttons. Sharing buttons is kind of proven that they slow your website down, and there's no point. But in the navigation, I would definitely give people the opportunity to follow you. So I would have follow icons, because they can be in the navigation really easily. They don't slow your website down, whereas most of the other widget that you add to count the likes or to do the sharing, those do slow your website down, and apparently it's just a vanity metric and it doesn't really matter. I've taken them down off my website. So even though I end up then talking about so much more, and in my case also, when we do, in the case of the Cloudways webinars, I am so fantastically followed by and helped along by my colleagues Jan Koch and Lee Jackson, who ask me a lot of questions as well, things that they notice that I may not see, and then also they do their bit, which is then Jan would look at speed, and speed is a hugely important aspect of user experience, and as well as SEO, but anyway, lots of things. But Jan looks at speed and analyzes that, and then Lee looks at the way they're marketing themselves and how their social media presence works, how if they're exploiting it enough, and so on. So anyway, this is it in a nutshell. I could go on for much longer. I'll leave it for now, but these are the points that I cover in my reviews as a sort of with a sort of big sweeping view. It's what do you want your customers to do, your visual branding, your typography, your layout, colors and things like that, if there's anything that is not accessible and things like that, and then the general experience on the site and what your other pages are doing and whether you're doing a good job of communicating your message. But the first thing is always, what do you want and what do you give? Because where do you want your user to be really is, what do you do for them? Why are people on your website? That's the most important thing, and that's the first thing that I look at. So in the case of A Lovely Planet is, what do you want to give me? What do you want me to do? Why am I here? That's the thing. Right, I hope this was helpful and not too confusing, and thank you so much, and thank you Cloudways for hosting us and giving us the opportunity of helping people out with the webinars. Bye bye.